Hello and welcome to Climate Check with me, Mary Mwikisa. Thank you so much for making time. Now, today on the program, we will be focusing on a very interesting subject, and we focus on environmental rights. And under this, we will zero in into the policy framework around sustainable natural resource exploration and limits to natural resource exploration. And of course, we will understand what this means, what role you and I can play in protecting our natural resources, and also understanding what these natural resources are. And remember, this program is brought to you with support from the Strengthening Respect for Environmental Rights in Zambia project under HIVO's Southern Africa. We take a short break. Now, on the program, we start with a recent activity where a consortium of civil society organizations convened and released their position paper in preparation for the COP30 and the subsidiary bodies meeting happening in Bonn, Germany. Our staffer Zachariah Nyimbili attended the briefing.
A consortium of civil society organizations is stepping up preparations for the upcoming climate change coordination meeting in Bonn, Germany, and the Conference of Parties COP30 in Brazil. The consortium held media briefing in Lusaka recently focused on the CSO's position paper for the SB62 climate talks in Germany, a key step in preparing for COP30. People in Need country director Stefania Lagoingro spoke at the event.
We, as People in Need, strongly believe in the importance of hearing the voices of the communities, and who better than civil society organizations can bring these voices and needs on the tables of discussion and negotiations. And I believe it's our duty as non-governmental organizations, both national and international, to bring the CSOs in the game, otherwise they always be left out. And this paper should serve as reminding everyone that civil society organizations cannot be left out, because they are the drivers of the change in the communities where the actual climate change is seen every day. I think it's the whole community, but of course for each of the stakeholders there are specific messages in the paper. It was shared, the government with policies, access to funds, taxation should really make more affordable and sustainable solutions accessible to everyone. For example, for tapping through the CDF for preparedness and early warning to anticipate and mitigate the risks to climate change, but also the donor community to make the funds available for climate change, and also, of course, the countries, the governments, the financial institutions to support countries like Zambia to have portfolio available and not be always suffocated by debts.
And climate change expert Ebel Musumali explained updates, guides, and the status quo of the position paper.
Actually, the development of the position paper by CSOs, where we have brought out our concerns and issues in this position paper on COP30. And the position paper has been shared with the Minister of Green Economy and Environment, where we have highlighted key issues of concern as a civil society organization from Zambia. We've highlighted the issues relating to climate finance, issues relating to the global goal on adaptation, issues relating to mitigation interventions, issues relating to gender and climate change. So we expect that government and the key stakeholders will review and also consider some of the issues that which we've raised into this position paper. And also we've given a call to the global leaders to actively reduce their carbon emissions, so as to mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change, and to mobilize adequate finance for investment into climate interventions.
Meanwhile, Zambia Climate Change Network ZCCN representative Salatia Odaka called on developing countries to accelerate their climate action, establish clear adaptation goals, and put in place a fund to address climate impacts.
We call on developed countries to accelerate their efforts to reduce emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, focusing on phasing out undated coal power and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, while providing targeted support to developing countries, especially vulnerable nations. These must align with national circumstances and priorities, ensuring a just transition. We urge developed nations to facilitate access to loss and damage funds and establish a measurable global goal on adaptation with clear indicators and targets to assess climate impacts. Furthermore, financial and technical support should be directed towards smallholder farmers, indigenous people, and local communities whose roles in climate mitigation and ecosystem management are critical. Developing countries should allocate resources to strengthen early warning systems and climate information services, taking proactive measures to protect lives, livelihoods, and assets. Indigenous knowledge must be integrated into adaptation strategies and resilient building efforts to enhance the effectiveness of early warning systems. We call upon the UNFCCC Secretariat to remind developed countries of their leadership role in climate action under the Paris Agreement's principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, urging them to uphold their commitments.
As civil society organizations amplify their voice in shaping climate policy, the message is clear: decisive action is needed now to safeguard our planet. Zakaria Nyimbili reporting.
Welcome back. Now, as we focus on environmental rights, what rights are we referring to? And of course, what are these natural resources that we must protect even as we utilize them? How can we ensure we don't over-harvest them, we don't exploit them, because ultimately we get affected in the long run? Joining me in studio is Dr. Kabwe Mubanga, who is a climate change specialist. Thank you so much for making time, Doc.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.
Now, Doc, let's first appreciate what environmental rights around protection of natural resources could be in a layman's language.
Okay, thank you so much. So when we're looking at environmental rights, we actually appreciate that people who are living within the environment have actually the right to exploit the environment and the natural resources that are within them. But at the same time, we need to remember that even as we are making use of these natural resources, we are not the only ones who are the owners of this. The future generations will need this. But even the people around who are not even in close contact with these resources also have the rights to these resources. Take, for instance, if you have a forest, we understand that forests, in most instances, are actually where the regeneration for water happens. So even if you are the one who is living close to a forest, yes, you might have the right to utilize some of the things in the forest, but the others who also have rights to benefit from a lot of things that are coming from the forest. The forests will clean our air. The forests will provide non-forest timber products that could be used by a lot of people. So those are what we call as common pool resources that everybody has the right to, and nobody has exclusive right to just destroy or overexploit.
Now, currently, what policies preside over protection of our natural resources in Zambia?
Basically, particularly for us, we have several policies and several acts that actually speak to it. Of course, the major being the EMA, the Environmental Management Act.
Okay.
But of course, we also have the environmental policy and a few others, including the mining, because they all speak to the resources that can be protected, that need to be protected. Of course, we also have several SI instruments that would guide on how we are going to use and exploit some of these resources. The government has put in place these different frameworks that could either speak to forests, they would either speak to water, they would speak to minerals, but there's also a general one, the EMA, that speaks to all of these natural resources that we need to respect.
How effective are these policies, these regulations, these SIs?
Well, in terms of effectiveness, We can say they are, but they could also do better. Time and again, it's easy to put in place a plan of how you want to protect resources, how you want them to be exploited so that they do not get to diminish. But at the same time, implementation is also quite something else. And sometimes this is why I think the encouragement is that when it comes to implementation, it needs to be done in collaboration with the communities that are living in a particular place. I'll give you an example. If a particular community is living close to a forest, time and again, they may be utilizing that forest to produce charcoal, which end up giving them income for their livelihood. Yes, we can have a forest policy or a forest act that is actually going to stipulate how much should not be overexploited. But it's not always easy that the government at that high level is going to be able to manage to stop people cutting down those trees. So this is where now the communities come in. Sometimes some of the best forests we still have at hand are those that are actually managed through community-based organizations, including the traditional leaders. So conservation and management of these resources have to be done in close collaboration with the communities that are within, because they are the ones that are exploiting and that are using these resources. So the acts, the policies need to speak to the needs of the people on the ground. Even management needs to involve them.
Okay. Now, for example, let's pick land. And I will focus on mining, for example. We know as a country we're targeting to increase our copper production to 3 million metric tons by 2031. This means more mines opening up. How can that be done sustainably?
Of course, the aspect of mining is both a good thing for us and it could also provide challenges for us. We want to increase production, and that's good for the country because we're going to sell and get revenue. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind the destruction that mining leaves afterwards. Some of the environmental issues we are currently facing could actually be traced to how mining was done. I'll give you an example. Kabwe is registered as one of the top 10 most polluted places in the world because of the lead pollution. The lead pollution was as a result of the lead mining that was happening way ago.
Yes.
This time, most of those mines have even been decommissioned. But because the decommissioning was not done in an environmentally friendly manner, we still are facing the challenges that came as a result of such mining activities. At the same time, if you look at the magnesium that is happening currently along the stretch, the Great North Stretch, Serenge, Mukush areas, those, there are already conversations about possible magnesium poisoning, which could actually go on and affect us for a long time to come. Right now, small-scale mining, artisanal mining, is actually something that has been legalized through the Act. Now, think about this. How many licenses are we giving in a particular area? And if, let's say, you're giving a lot of people in a particular area, how do you balance the artisanal mining together with the forests that are going to be conserved? In what areas is this going to happen? And is there a plan that will enable regeneration of the vegetation that is removed after the mining is done? So all of those needs to be considered, especially at planning level. I think even when we are giving licenses, we need to be able to make sure that the EIAs and the EPBs that we are giving out properly stipulate how the decommissioning will be done and how there will be attempts to bring back the original environmental structure that was there before. That way, maybe we can talk about sustainability after the mining. But even if we're not doing that yet, something I would recommend is, even when the mining is currently going on, I think an equal volume of the vegetation, the trees that have been cut from a particular place, could actually be planted in an area that is possibly marginalized. That way we start transferring the benefits, the environmental benefits of a mining into another area, so that even by the time we reach a stage of decommissioning and also improving on the environment that was removed, we could have already managed some of the resources, the forest resources that were already removed from a particular area.
Mm-hmm. And the happening story now, Doc, I'm glad you spoke about the mining and the pollution that happened in Kabwe. We have a gold rush, if you like. So many areas, Eastern Province, Central Province, Northwestern Province. Just recently we've heard of the I don't know if you can call them illegal miners who have died in Mufumbo. And a few days ago, we saw a clip of miners digging gold, and in the end now, the land has caved in on them. How can such situations be managed? Because you see, they are using whatever it is to dig, not knowing if they're doing it correctly, not knowing the impact of what will be left behind.
I think it's always a challenge to manage economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. It's not easy to tell a hungry person that you can't go and do this when they really need to be able to do something that will help put food on their table. But at the same time, I think these are opportunities for the powers that be to be able to engage with those who are actually doing that. So that is there a way that mining can be either legalized or made in a safe way? We understand that there's a ministry that is directly responsible for those miners and for making sure there's safety for the miners. I think these are areas that they need to engage with those who are mining and try to bring sanity around, because it's a dangerous venture to be able to get into mining without proper safety equipment and without proper equipment, as it were. So I think this would just be an appeal to the powers that be, that there gets to be conversations which will allow sustainable and safe mining that is happening in those areas, as it were.
Let's talk about water. Again, recently we heard of pollution in the Kafue River out of mining as well. And there's much more that could be happening that we're not aware of. How can we ensure that even as we bring in investments into this country, our resources such as water are protected?
Water is a very important resource for us. And the thing about water is it's not something that is owned by anyone, but at the same time, it's something we own. These are common pool resources. That means whatever anyone is putting into the water actually affects a lot of people. That pollution that happened with the release of the pollutants into the water changed a lot of ecosystem. The ecology of that water was highly, highly affected. And we will see these effects for quite a while, because some of the inhabitants of the water, some of the fishes, some of the animals, some of the ecosystems could actually be changed for a long time. We could even see invasive species coming in that could be able to survive the changed environment in the water. So those are issues that we do not want to affect a property that is owned by everybody, and that in essence is not owned by anyone, because no one has the right to pollute a common pool resource. But that said, this is where again we need to have strict measures to be able to entail that the EIAs that are provided for are able to properly define how all the waste, how all the pollutants are going to be disposed of. But even if that is done, we need a very strong monitoring system that should be able to ensure that the developers are strictly adhering to the conditions that were set up in their approval letter from ZEMA and from all the environmental regulating bodies. And I think if we are able to do close monitoring, we are able to ensure that whatever was in the EPBs and the EIAs are strictly followed, we could prevent some of these occurrences from happening. But I think maybe one of the challenge could be that we might not have enough resource to be able to take care or to manage everyone who is doing what. But I think this is something that we need to be able to change. At the same time, if an accident like that happens, there needs to be repercussions so that there could be a way of either deterring those who might in future engage in something similar, but at the same time could be able to help with a reduction in the pollution that has already gone in the water. Yes, it's not easy to remove whatever has been polluted into the water, but I think we can engage in mechanisms to be able to prevent those in future by strictly monitoring some of these activities that have the potential to be hazards to the water.
Now, we also heard cases of, we have a lot of companies that are producing water, bottled water for sale, and some of them are actually drilling boreholes in various parts of Lusaka, for example. And in those locations, the residents who also depend on that resource are beginning to have dry boreholes because there's a company set up there removing millions of cubicles of water every day for commercial purposes. How can the current laws prevent or manage such a situation?
I think the Water Resource Management Act that is spearheaded by WAMA speaks a lot to that. In essence, this is one of the reasons why WAMA is able to monitor wherever anyone is going to set up a borehole. Because sometimes there are pathways even for water within the borehole. It's very possible that you can have your borehole here and your neighbor digs one close and the water just gets diverted to them and you need to look for another way of getting access to the water. But if WAMA is allowed to be monitoring this, it is possible that if your boreholes are too close to each other, they will tell you that, no, here there is one, so maybe you need to put it somewhere a bit distant. Those ways of monitoring where we are going to put boreholes not just help with ensuring that everybody has access to water, but it also helps to ensure that we don't get into groundwater pollution. Sometimes, I'll give you an example, areas where plots are small, and I think the law stipulates that we need to have at least between where we have our septic tanks and where we have our borehole, there needs to be at least 50 meters. The understanding is that the groundwater will not be able to mix.
There will be no contamination.
There will be no contamination. Now imagine you have a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 15 and your neighbor has 10 by 15. What mathematics are you going to use to dig a borehole and also a septic tank? And the distance will not be less than 50 meters. So sometimes those issues just ends up in contaminating the groundwater. So there should be a point when we actually come to a point or a state when we might have to start putting these boreholes. If your plots are small, does each household really need to have a borehole? Or can we have a centralized borehole that everybody can be getting water from there? Similarly, if we are in an area where we are clogged, can we have a centralized system for a septic tank that does not require that everybody has a septic tank and we encourage groundwater pollution? So those are systems we need to start thinking around so that we can be able to reduce on the water contamination because of the septic tank.
This is Climate Check. We take a short break. We'll be right back. We have come to the end of this week's edition of Climate Check. Make a date with me next week, same time, same channel, as we continue to create discourse around protection of our environment and taking care of our planet. Thank you for watching. My name is Mary Mwikisa. Goodbye.